Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhyolite Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review, and we play local, unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And you can email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's DANE.COBAIN@wickhamsound.org.uk. If you missed the show, we are repeated on Monday nights or on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your platform of choice, it all helps. And yeah, this week we are going to be chatting to author Chris Fitzmaurice. But before we do that, we're going to have some. We're going to head over to the Rhyolite Zone even to catch up with the latest instalment of Insomniac, which is a novella by myself, Dane Cobain. Insomniac. Week 26, day 6. She lay there for 2 days and 2 nights. Then, on the 3rd day, she woke up. Her hands were stained with blood. It had dried and caked onto them until it looked like she'd left her hands to soak in a bowl of food colouring. She was still holding onto the knife. Kate groaned and pulled herself up. Her hands were shaking and her heart was racing. She screamed when she saw the body. It looked artificial, like a mannequin with blemished grey flesh and blue extremities. It looked like a frostbite victim. And it sure as hell looked like Nana Knight. That was because it was Nana Knight. The old woman was dead again, and this time she wasn't coming back. She had a gash in her chest and her old lady entrails were hanging out like an abominable interrobang. She was definitely dead, and it was definitely from Kate's knife. And it definitely wasn't Zeb. Zeb had different eyes, and they were looking at her, laughing at her. She passed out again. Week 27, day 5. I killed my grandmother, Kate said. No, you didn't, Dr. Hansworth replied. Yes, I did, Kate insisted, and then she told him what had happened. I didn't mean to, I thought she was Zeb. And you tried to kill him? Yes. Dr. Hansworth sighed. Real or not, he said, you shouldn't stab people. I know, Kate replied, Nana Knight told me that. And then you stabbed her? Yes. Dr. Hansworth thought for a moment. I don't know, Kate, he said, I'm worried about you. Are you sleeping? No. I thought not, Hansworth replied. I think we should take another look at your medication. Kate sighed. Of course, she said. I'm sorry, Hansworth told her. There's only so much I can do, and if we want you to get better, we're going to have to step things up. And what if I say no? Kate, I'm going to be honest here, Hansworth said. You have a serious illness. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were. He looked at her, and she was reminded of Zeb and how difficult it was to turn away from him. You need to get some sleep, Kate. I mean it. Look at you. What about me? Dr. Hansworth smashed his fist off his desk in frustration. Kate flinched and shrank back, and Hansworth hastily apologised. Kate, he said, I can't help you. This isn't a psychological condition. You mean I'm not crazy? I didn't say that, the doctor said, but sure, why not? Kate, I'm not going to lie. You have a lot of neurosis and a clear-cut case of OCD, but these things that you're seeing, the visions you're having, I think they're a byproduct of your lack of sleep. If we can fix your sleep, we'll fix your hallucinations. They're not hallucinations. Perhaps not, Dr. Hansworth said. I have no doubt that they feel very real to you, but at the same time, you must admit that there's something strange going on. Your dead grandmother came back to life and then you killed her. You don't think that's a little odd? Kate shrugged. What happened to the body? It disappeared, she admitted. 1 minute it was there and the next it had gone. And you don't think it was a hallucination? She shrugged again. I don't know what it was, she said. I don't much care for labels. Right. Dr. Hansworth paused for a moment. I'm going to follow up with that sleep specialist. Let's see if we can't speed up your appointment. Week 29, day 3. Kate lay low for a couple of weeks. She felt like a criminal, and she guessed that she technically was, but she also agreed with Dr. Hansworth. With no body, there was no crime, and that thought put her at ease, even though it also said a lot about her mental state. She still couldn't sleep, though, but that didn't surprise her. What else is new, she thought. On the plus side, she'd been given new medication, some mad concoction from the boffins that was supposed to help her sleep. It didn't, but it did stop the crazy visions, and for a little while she'd felt almost normal. On the Wednesday of week 29, she had her appointment with Dr. Jalopnik, the sleep specialist. She was a woman, which Kate hadn't been expecting, and she was young, which she hadn't been expecting either. They even looked similar, and both were strict and methodical. They warmed to each other almost immediately. How can I help? Jalopnik asked. So Kate told her the whole story, sparing the woman none of the details. The doctor looked slightly concerned when Kate got to the bit with a knife and the corporeal ghost of her grandmother, but she listened patiently and didn't pass judgment. It wasn't her job. When Kate told her what Dr. Hansworth had said about the lack of sleep affecting her ability to differentiate between fiction and reality, Dr. Jalopnik sat forward and paid close attention. It's certainly true that hallucinations are common amongst people who are suffering from sleep deprivation, Dr. Jalopnik said, and I can see from the charts that your sleeping pattern is non-existent. It's from my Fitbit, Kate said, tapping the device on her wrist. Very nice, Jalopnik said. That'll give us some data to start with. So what happens next? I'd like to keep you in overnight, the doctor said. We'll set you up in one of our pods so we can track your vitals. I'd like to get a good look at what's going on inside that brain of yours. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. That was the latest instalment of my novella, Insomniac. And this is Jazz Dillon with How.
One of those nights out, with the lights down low. How did we get here now? One of those nights out, with the lights down low. Here we are again. Here we are again. Here we are again. Here we are again. How did we get here now? One of those nights out, with the lights down low. Tell me how did we get here now? One of those nights out, with the lights down low. Soft-spoken, heartbroken, into the night we go. Soft-spoken, heartbroken, into the night we go. Soft-spoken, heartbroken, into the night we go. Soft-spoken, heartbroken, into. Here we are again.
Another night out again, making more money of course. Reminds me like chill with bro. Before he went pen, I was doing up sets, he was bagging up jewels. Man see clear like contact lens. Stepped in my plain white, still got sauce. All iPhones me and I give them
How often do you hear a pedalo brave in the deep dark sea? How often do you hear a pedalo brave in the deep dark sea? Well, that's as common to find as a woman that doesn't pine over me. Well, be soft and harmless, it makes for the perfect disguise. Well, be soft and harmless, it makes for the perfect disguise. What I'm seen as no competition in their husband's eyes. I've got a way, kind of way that puts out the woman's shade. I've got a way, kind of way that puts out the woman's shade. laughing with their men, but it's me running round their head. But you can say I'm true, all the power's out of my steer. Oh, you can say I'm true, all the power is out of my steer. And the order I'm purveying is one that men should live to fear. But I say time and time again, darling, stay with the man you've got. But I say time and time again, darling, stay with the man you've got. But they say I want a big nose Thomas time on my man, he is not.
That was Pedal Blues by Big Nose Thomas, and before that we had How by Jazz Dillon. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and I'm going to be joined in conversation now by this week's guest, who is author Chris Fitzmaurice. So the first question is my traditional opening question. I ask everybody this one. It's, what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
Oh, I'm reading Cancer Ward by Solzhenitsyn. It's a satire of Stalinism. It's very bleak, but I think it would make a brilliant stage play. Under certain circumstances, it would be horrific. But yeah, if you're into satire, I think it would definitely work in that way.
Cool. Awesome. And obviously, chatting about speaking of writing and books, I want to chat to you about your writing. How did you get your start? How did you first start writing things?
So well, I was interested in stories from when I could speak, based on what I've heard from my parents. But in terms of writing, I think it was around the age of 14 to 16. I just started scribbling things in notebooks. And then obviously, as you grow older, you get more opportunities, and you kind of think about how you can turn it into a career, etc. So then I got into screenwriting informally and all kinds of different writing.
Well, and you mentioned how good the book you're reading might be as a play. Have you ever considered going into playwriting?
Oh, definitely, yeah. If I had the chance, it's a slightly different format to screenwriting, but yeah, if I learned how to do if I learned how to write that, and I had some opportunities. I mean, you could just write it for fun, I suppose, to start with, couldn't you? That's how it starts. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
I mean, I suppose, again, it's like a barrier to entry thing, because if you write, if you write fiction or non-fiction, you can pop that on a blog, or you can self-publish reasonably easily. When it comes to, say, a stage play or a screenplay, it's a little bit harder. With the stage play, people probably aren't going to read it. You need to find like an acting troupe who would be happy to stage a performance. And, a screenplay is then the next step up, where actually you need to film and edit the thing as well.
That's true, yeah. I mean, you can write I've written lots of I've written lots of film scripts. I just haven't really got around to obviously at film school. I went to film school, so I directed my own film there. But yeah, so I think it really is just getting started, getting into the habit of writing, and I think stage plays will be the same as any other kind of writing. I mean, submitting it and getting it acted and getting it performed will be another thing, but writing is really the first stage, isn't it? And seeing lots of plays also.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And so I mentioned to you, I've been listening to your sort of, I guess you'd call it a podcast, but it does many things. Foxgloves and Nylon Heartstrings. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I just why did I start that? I just enjoy spoken word. I think I remember back in the few years ago, I used to attend your spoken word night. And I just thought audiobooks are quite an interesting format. and yeah, I haven't really thought about getting published in any serious way. But thought that audiobook formats work for different things. I'm interested in sound design. That's kind of when I went to film school, sound design was the thing I was good at. And so I just sort of combine the two, bit of photography as well. You can put a image, as the and so the combination of all three would be it's an interesting format, and it's just an easy way to publish your stuff and see what people think and get feedback. Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that. How does sound design play into what you do on the podcast?
Yeah, so some of them are just straight spoken word. Some of them are opportunities for the sound design, to be honest. A lot of the science fiction ones, I think about how I would design the sound for the world I'm imagining, and the words almost complementary to it. So some of them are written, some of them I think about as poem stories, and some of them I think about as sound worlds that require words to go with them. Because what was it? The Interstellar Salesman, that started as, that's kind of a mixture of both. I thought about it in terms of sound primarily. That's why it's a lot of heavy sound design in that one. But at the same time, I suppose I imagined that as more as a kind of radio thing than a poem, if that makes sense. Because some of them you imagine as poems and you just write them, and then you add sound if you want to. That one I imagined as a kind of more immersive one. In fact, immersive sound design, especially I suppose 3D audio is something I'd like to get into. Something I think is, there are opportunities for that. So that those kind of areas feed into it, and it's really just like anything else, you just do it as a hobby and see where it goes.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose again, like a lot of poetry is sound based. I mean, obviously you have some poetry that is specifically designed to just be read from a page. But again, from the spoken word nights that we used to have, that's more about poetry that is performed in a sense. So do you think you approach writing poetry with almost a sound design, a sound design focus to the way that the words sound and the way that they'll be delivered?
Oh, definitely, definitely, I think, poetry is, written to be, well, not always, but the poetry I write is written to be performed, I think, definitely. I think even when you're teaching poetry, performing it is so important. Definitely.
Cool. And I wanted to ask you, like, in terms of the podcast, what does creating the podcast allow you to do that you wouldn't be able to do without it? I mean, I suppose part of it, again, comes back to being able to experiment with sound design. But does it give you any other opportunities that, you wouldn't have access to if you weren't creating the podcast?
I suppose it's a bit like YouTube without the videos. I mean, there are some, I think they're starting to add videos, but really it's a similar kind of idea. It's about reach. It's finding little communities. I think I was on some kind of writing community where you kind of edit each other's work, and I just thought podcasting is the next kind of thing, isn't it, really?
Cool. And what do you like? How do you record and edit the podcasts?
Oh, just Audacity, just on my laptop. I probably should get a microphone if I were to do it professionally, but yeah, you just record it with your laptop. I get rid of the background noise, and it sounds good enough for how most people will hear it. If I was going to do a 3D immersive thing, probably have to re-record it properly, and in that case, you probably have to mix it. You probably have to design the room and mix it in the room, because 3D audio, you have to arrange the speakers. But in terms of just a podcast that people listen to on their phones or on their laptops, it's fine. Just record it with your laptop and then clean it up with Audacity. I mean, because I learned how to do that when I was doing sound design, so it's not a major barrier.
Cool. So one of the things that I particularly liked on it, there was the longer piece, the thing about AI and how it can be used to sort of model evolution as well. And I wondered, what did you learn about that, and how can AI be used to model evolution?
Oh, that was the documentary, wasn't it? Yeah, that was 2018. Yeah, that was brilliant. How did I start that? Oh yeah, so I was thinking about so that's University College London, isn't it? So there's Imperial College London. They have effective computing, which is modeling. So affect is the way that we display emotion. And so effective computing is about reading human emotion and trying to go beyond that and trying to change how we feel. And so it's about reading emotions and then changing the way it works in order to respond to us. And then evolutionary computing, it's quite old. It started in the 1990s. It was a machine learning. I think AI and kind of modern AI is kind of overtook it because I don't know why it overtook it really, but evolutionary computing is about modeling. It's about, as he says, taking inspiration from nature, because a lot of the computer science techniques, loops, if statements, they're kind of already in DNA. The natural world is a brilliant optimizer. Natural selection is a brilliant optimizer, and then there's more recently there's things like plastic evolution and epigenetics, and those would be really interesting once you get into those, if you could implement them in a computer system. Yes, so evolutionary computing tries to model creativity, and because of the way creativity works, it's how would you say? Not random.
Yeah.
It's trial and error, right? Trial and error, isn't it? In a way. And it's about connecting different ideas. And evolutionary computing follows a similar kind of system. And so if you can model that, you can create. I think that's one of the odd things about generative AI, right? The modern one, it's based on more predictive systems. I don't know if it's right. They're trying to use generative AI for creative industries, which is quite strange because it's not as creative as evolutionary computing. If they started using evolutionary computing, then I think they managed to combine the two technologies. Then I think we'd be in real trouble, wouldn't we? But they haven't found that out yet. They will have found it out now, won't they? But yeah, no, it's a fascinating technology, and I suppose the ethics of machine learning even more fascinating. It's something we have to think about as the technology progresses. Think about making sure that it's for the social good and not just for profits of massive corporations.
Yeah. Cool. And that kind of builds into, again, you've done your fair share of sort of science fiction writing. So what is it about science and science fiction that interests you, both kind of in general and then also from the point of view of a writer?
Okay, so I think I'm interested in social issues. I'm interested in social realism, but I think social realism is almost too specific, almost too personal. It's about lived experiences, isn't it? But if you could generalize it, if you can make it more abstract with, for example, science fiction, fantasy, I think that makes it easier, more accessible, because you can take the ideas and you can present them in different ways. So you can, for example, Cancer Ward isn't science fiction, but it takes the themes of totalitarianism and it puts them into satire, which is a lot more accessible because even though it's set in, I think, Dagestan in the 1950s, you can see the universal themes that come through because of the way that they're projected in science fiction. I think it's just a brilliant way you realize that even in 1,000 years' time, unless technology has completely changed us, we'll still have the same issues, the same things to overcome. So it's one of those ways of generalizing and making things scientific, accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, I suppose, of how something like The Handmaid's Tale asks all of these questions about, equality and inequality, gender, stereotypical gender roles, even religion. And it does so in such a way that, you're consuming a story and I mean, I find it enjoyable. I know it's dark, But you know, it's designed for entertainment, shall we say? But it asks questions along the way as well, and I suppose that's what, again, good science fiction and maybe good writing in general does.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's about finding a way in and allowing one to imagine that you are in the shoes of someone who, you know, maybe you've never met before, and allowing you to empathize with the characters. Yeah, that's definitely part of what writing's about.
You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with this week's guest, who is author Chris Fitzmaurice, and this is Fabulous Parfait with Sugar Mice.
I was flicking through the channels on the TV on a Sunday in Milwaukee in the rain, trying to piece together conversations, trying to find out where to lay the blame. But when it comes right down to it, there's no use trying to pretend. For when it gets right down to it, there's no one here that's left to blame. Blame it on me, blame it on me. We're just sugar mice in the rain. I heard Sinatra calling me down through the floorboards, where you pay a quarter for a partnership in rhyme. To the jukebox crying in the corner, while the waitress is counting out the time. For when it gets right down to it, there's no use trying to pretend. For when it gets right down to it, there's no one here that's left to blame. Blame it on me, oh, you can blame it on me. We're just sugar mice in the rain. 'Cause I know what I feel, know what I want, I know what I am. Daddy took a rain check. 'Cause I know what I want, know what I feel, I know what I need. Your daddy took a rain check. Your daddy took a rain check. Ain't no one in here that's left to blame but me. Blame it on me. Blame it on me. Well, the toughest thing that I ever did was talk to the kids on the phone. When I heard them asking questions, I knew that you were all alone. Can't you understand that the government left me out of work? I just couldn't stand the looks on their faces saying, what a jerk. So if you want my address, it's number 1 at the end of the bar, where I sit with the broken angels, clutching at straws and nursing our scars. Blame it on me, you can blame it on me. Sugar mice in the rain. Sugar mice.
That was Sugar Mice by Fabulous Parfait. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with author Chris Fitzmaurice. Let's get back to it.
For sure. And so how does writing poetry differ from writing, say, sort of science fiction?
I mean, you can write science fiction poetry, but poetry, I suppose, is an episode, isn't it? It's like a little, it's just a little moment. I suppose an analogy could be Fleetwood Mac. There's a song called Dragonfly, and it's a couple of minutes long, but it's just about a dragonfly arriving and disappearing, and it's that kind of ephemeral idea. You know, I suppose science fiction often is these sweeping worlds. You have to do world building. You have to create the characters. You have to make them allow the reader to suspend disbelief, to suspend their disbelief, so that they can actually believe in the world, and they can start to see the ideas that you're presenting and try to connect them to their own lives, and the symbolism has to come through in its own way. Poetry, you have to do that in a few lines potentially, unless it's an epic poem. Of course, epic poetry is another thing altogether, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned there sort of the, getting the audience to suspend their disbelief. I mean, do you think, going back to the podcast, maybe some of the things you do with the sound design helps you to do that, or is maybe a shortcut to do that, in terms of sort of the things that the person is hearing as they hear the story?
Oh, definitely, yeah. That's one of the draws of it, because one of the things I enjoyed about writing films was I'd imagine the sounds, and the sounds go beyond what you see on the screen, don't they? And so if you think about the things that go beyond the screen, then you're creating a more immersive world, and you're building up the idea that there is a world beyond this, imaginary shot. And so sound design definitely allows you to. It adds. It's like painting, isn't it? With sound, it adds details, and you can see maybe even contradictions. If you're a really sophisticated writer, then you could probably create an unreliable protagonist, and you could use the sound design to contradict what you're writing, and you can make, you can there's all kinds of things that great writers can do. Could be, there's all kinds of potential with that. I'm just an amateur writer, but there's all kinds of potential.
Lots of room to play with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I was watching. I'll try and remember after our chat to find the link to this for you. But I was watching. It was like a behind the scenes making of mini documentary on YouTube, about 5 minutes long, about the All Quiet on the Western Front, the movie of it that came out last year or whenever it was. And what was really interesting there, they were talking specifically about the sound design. And they were saying, there's no point in them trying to make the actual sounds completely accurate and trying to get the the accurate way that the guns would have sounded or this and that. Instead, what they did was they focused on, because obviously this was World War I, there weren't really any recordings, but they focused on the letters that soldiers had written about the way that the way they described things, and they had different nicknames for different grenades and things because of the different sounds they made, and they were trying to create sound design that echoed the way that those letters were and the way they described it. But they also said, like, war is this grand sweeping thing, and they had these huge battlefields, and there was only so much they could include without kind of overwhelming the viewer. So they'd have to be very careful where, in one shot they would be trying to show the whole battlefield and just this huge amount of noise, and then in the next shot, they're trying to focus on just what this one character hears. And it was really interesting the way they approached that. And they even said, like, all the actors were wearing mics, and they were quite often, they'd like jump down or whatever, and they'd land on their mic, and it would make this, distorted, horrible sound or whatever. And they quite often deliberately used those sounds in the final mix as well, just to kind of add that little bit of realism to it. But it was really interesting to watch how they kind of created a soundscape about this, this wartime raging battle scene, So I'll send that over to you.
Brilliant. I'd love to see that. Yeah, that's the idea of diegetic sound, non-diegetic sound, and metadiegetic. So diegetic sound is the sounds you'd expect to see in the real world. So the sounds that you'd expect, a tree falling over, a gun, etc. Non-diegetic is the kind of thing like a film score. And then metadiegetic is somewhere in between. So, for example, beating, heartbeat. Is it literally somebody's heartbeat, or is it a kind of musical effect where it's a mixture of two, isn't it? And so that idea of metadiegetic sound is really really fun. We had a film project actually in film school. We were so Dogma 95 is a set of rules. It says that everything has to be. It's just it's a set of dogmatic rules designed to constrain the creativity and force the filmmakers to be creative within the boundaries of these quite restrictive ideas. And one of the rules we had was only diegetic sound. And I mean, I used metadiegetic sounds to bend that, the sounds of a heart beat. Some of the kind of, because it was a film about a cult, so we were using the kind of ritualistic sounds. We were trying to bend the rules as much as possible. But yes, that kind of distorted sound mic, jumping on the mic, as you mentioned, that kind of diegetic, non-diegetic, metadiegetic, really allows you to blur real and fictional, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely.
Well, and as well with I guess, the idea you were saying earlier about, an unreliable narrator, it would be interesting to have an unreliable narrator, and then with that, oh, my Google Home just went off. It'd be fun to have an unreliable narrator, and then some of that metadiegetic stuff where you actually don't know if they're, is it real? Is it just in their imagination? A bit like in the Joker movie, where you never quite can tell whether he's just imagining it or whether something is actually happening. So I think it could be fun to play with those too.
Definitely, yeah. What's the novel? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think if you were going to do a new adaptation, sound design would be so interesting, wouldn't it? Because I mean, the adaptation, the film adaptation they made of it was good in its own way, but it was completely different to the tone of the novel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so if you were going to do a new film adaptation that was more faithful to the novel, sound design, can you imagine the kind of things you could do with sound design? Yeah, definitely. Good idea. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So just a couple of questions to end on. You went traveling to Japan, right? Was it Japan that you went to? Or did I imagine that?
I worked in mainland China and Hong Kong, but I also went on holiday to Japan just before COVID, like a couple of weeks before COVID. It was, yes. Went to Takamatsu. It was in the winter, so it was out of tourist season. It's quite interesting that there was all kinds of that we went to a pirate island, and on an island where pirates lived, and people had kind of mythologized the pirates, and so they had ogres instead of pirates. Is that what I'm not sure. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I was just wondering as well, like, is there anything you picked up sort of during those visits and the time that you worked in China and Hong Kong that you've applied to your writing?
Oh, definitely. Some of the ideas, some symbolism. Yeah, I think the Eastern religions are different to kind of. Yeah, absolutely. It's intangible, isn't it? It's hard to describe the influence, but the first novel that I started trying to write was heavily influenced by. I started writing after I climbed a mountain in Eastern China, and the environment, things like just the weather is different, the food, the language, all of these experiences blend in, and subconsciously, and you obviously they melt together, and then you paint with them in the sound design, and the sound design definitely influenced the sound design, the sounds of the insects and the city life, and the kind of clash of nature and urban life. These ideas melded in the sound design and definitely got through into the writing as well.
Well, I suppose, most writers, they sort of write from experience. I mean, everybody's they have their subjective view of the world based upon their experience. So I imagine it kind of feeds into that. But maybe also, again, going back to the science fiction stuff where you're almost describing a completely different world to the one, that we live in today. I suppose it helps that you've kind of had that experience of going from one culture to a completely different culture. So you kind of know what it's like to go somewhere that's completely new and completely alien.
Yes, definitely. It definitely does. It changes your entire way of seeing the world when you see things from different perspectives. Yes, and the effect of moving from one place to another. So I was in the first lockdown. So COVID started obviously in I was in the first lockdown in my apartment, and then I came back for the third lockdown in the UK. And the lockdowns were different, and I was also in another lockdown in Hong Kong, but it wasn't a formal lockdown in the same way because they had different rules. But it was the different experiences and different perspectives and different ways that societies viewed the pandemic and different psychological impacts and the impacts. It was yes, definitely it adds into that adds into the detail, and it allows you to, well, hopefully allows you to change the narrative perspective and think about the protagonists and think about, you know, and make them more complex. You know, currently I'm reading The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is an ancient Chinese text, and a lot of the characters are anti-heroes. You know, at the time that when Chaucer was writing, and it's the kind of ancient Chinese texts are very thoughtful, and they were written at a time when there was a lot of creative freedom. You know, very interesting insight, and not that famous here. So interesting, definitely interesting. Yeah.
Cool. And just the last question to end on, it's kind of 2 in 1 really. What have you got planned next, and where can people follow you to find out more?
Oh, what have I got planned? Oh yes, I need to write a film script. I want to write a film. Well, I'm writing a film script set in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong film industry is brilliant. If I could get something published there, I do need to learn Cantonese. You know, I have kind of experiments where I write some of the poems I've written on my podcast are in Chinese or Cantonese, Mandarin, or Putonghua or Guangdonghua, Cantonese and Mandarin. So I want to experiment with language definitely next. Continue with that. I've got a couple of things I'm trying to write in Cantonese, and AI is useful for translate, although it's not always that reliable. You have to double check it and yeah. Anyway, yes. So Spotify definitely. Yeah. So I think for now it'll be my podcast. Yeah, I think that's the place to follow me currently.
Big thank you to Chris Fitzmaurice for joining me. You're listening to The Heart Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for some more music. We have Chameleon with It's Not Quite Me Now.
Must be tired. Why is it so hard to sleep? Heart on fire. Shame the quiet on the street. Out on the corner, lamplight pouring at my feet. Standing a daze, head bowed in defeat. Still in the air, pounding heartbeat. It's not quite me now, but it will be. But it will be. It's not quite me now, but it will be. Comes a little rain, follows the clouding of the sun. Rooted to the ground, earthly moving ever on. Scared of the dark, water patterns on the glass. Hands on the wheel, sensation that lasts. Heavy night air, mind comes to rest. It's not quite me now, but it will be. I was wrong, but I'll add that to the wind. The hollow night's still cold, oh, that's coming to an end. Streets are empty, the echoes as you pass, from the radio playing, same old songs from the past. I'm late to the party, but I'm catching up fast. It's not quite me now, but it will be. It's not quite me now, but it will be. It's not quite me now, but it will be. No. It's not quite me now, but it will be. No. Yeah, yeah. It's not quite me now, but it will be. It's not quite me now, but it will be. It's not quite me now, but it will.
Do whatever you might love, for you might only get now to live the once. Hold your life with both of your hands. Be patient and try to understand. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Empathize and try to understand how the world can be so underhand. Hold your breath and don't let it go. Might be your last, now you never know. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Keep the faith and keep your mind stay strong. For the rights we do, we know we do some wrong. Wrap your fingers around world somehow. Keep on moving, don't let 'em slow you down. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Freedom, oh freedom, oh now freedom from my mind. Freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom from my mind.
That was Freedom by Kit Goff, and before that we had It's Not Quite Me Now by Chameleon. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and it's time for us to head over to the Oak Shed now to catch up with Twang and Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Slaughter on 10th Avenue, Mick Ronson. Mick Ronson was David Bowie's guitarist in the Ziggy Stardust years. Together they caused a stir by hugging on top of the Pops. But that was tame compared to their stage show. Ronson helped the Spiders bawl and play and move like tigers on Vaseline. And though they had a good thing going, Ziggy split up the band, and Bowie's manager tried to make Mick Ronson a star in his own right. I heard Mick Ronson's version of Richard Rodgers' Slaughter on 10th Avenue on the radio, and something about the melody moved me more than any blues rock guitar solo ever had. Even the simple basic 2-chord intro gets my hairs standing in anticipation of the main theme, which in a very few notes suggests danger, menace and doomed romance. Hearing that theme made me search through my parents' LPs to find an orchestral version. This led to me taking much more of an interest in musical theatre. Roger's version starts with ominous harmonies like the start of Puccini's Nessun Dorma, and as the piece progresses it goes through pure Hollywood schmaltz, romantic and modern classical, and big band jazz. I used to watch the TV shows made up of old movie clips, hoping to see the Gene Kelly ballet, where he dances a barroom fight with Vera Allen and they both end up dead. I have since found a 1939 version danced by Vera Zorina and Eddie Albert. It is intense to say the least. 7 minutes of sexy, raw emotion. I would say it is my favourite ballet, but it is probably the only ballet I have ever liked. When file sharing was a thing, I built up a whole folder of versions of the piece. There is a surf version by The Ventures, copied by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. There is a version by The Shadows, played quite straight with Hank using a wobbly tremolo and his signature vibrato. There is a jazz organ version by Jimmy Smith, and also versions by the likes of Glenn Miller and Mantovani. Mick Ronson has the limitations of a rock band, but the considerable advantage of being able to bend the notes on the electric guitar to squeeze out every last drop of emotion. He is joined by some ex-Spiders from Mars, and Mike Garson adds a big Hollywood grand piano as they work their way through all the right changes, though it is edited down to half the length of the Rogers ballet. The rest of the album is very David Bowie, though Bowie does not appear. In a lengthy piece of several styles which Ronson co-wrote, Garson plays some insane Aladdin-sane piano, and then the band get to swing like all that jazz. There are 2 songs that Ronson co-wrote, and the other is a simple catchy rock song with the kind of guitar he played on The Man Who Sold the World. There is one song written by David Bowie, but apart from the title track, what most impressed me was a track called Music is Lethal. It sounds like it had been written by Jacques Brel and performed in the style of classic Scott Walker, but the tune was written by an Italian songwriter called Lucio Battisti, and the words were written by, obviously, David Bowie. Slaughter on 10th Avenue, Mick Ronson.
Big thank you to Twangly Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Chris Fitzmaurice for being this week's guest. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people who might be interested in coming on the show, people with MP3s to share. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune. This is previous guest Tom Bradley Jr. with Notice Me. I'll catch you next week.
Pick the post up at the door and cleaned up the floor, 'cause we don't talk anymore now. Broken memories left to waste, and I need a little space, 'cause we don't talk anymore now. But I hope she's doing fine without me, and I hope she changed her mind. Notice me, yeah, and I hope she's doing fine without me, and I hope she changed her mind and notice me. Empty places at the table now, and I'm out of place somehow, 'cause we don't talk anymore now. Broken memories left to waste, and I need my best mate, 'cause we don't talk anymore now. But I hope she's doing fine without me. And I hope she change her mind, notice me, yeah. And I hope she's doing fine without me. And I hope she change her mind and notice me. But I hope she